Good morning, everybody. We are back for fabulous Friday of this Kellogg Symposium. And I'd like to officially say happy purple morning to you who are on our symposium as our audience, and to you, Alanna Cotton, who I'm so excited to get a chance to visit with today and to share your wonderful experience with this entire group. Happy purple morning to you. How are you today?
I'm great, Laura. Happy purple to you. Friday, right?
Yay, Friday is absolutely right. For those of you who spend a minute looking at the agenda, we are really lucky to be talking with Alanna today. She is the president of operations for Central and Eastern Europe for Coca-Cola. Now, that is interesting in and of itself because that requires her to understand 26 countries and 150 brands. It's no small task. And she's been in that job for less than a year. So think about that for a second. She's only been operating in this unbelievably disruptive moment in her tenure at Coca-Cola. And frankly, that would make a great conversation. But that's actually not what we're going to talk about today, because as I got to know Alanna before we had this conversation, what was clear to me is really what prepared her for this amazing opportunity that she has now. And that's real years of experience in large companies, in big brands, each of which experienced a disruptive moment that she had to lead through and learn from. So, really, what we're going to center our conversation around today is how did she take all of that and apply it in the situation where she is today? And how do you actually take that learning over time and build your philosophy around leading through disruption? Now, I would say many people have different definitions of what that means. And perhaps the most interesting part of my conversation in getting to know Alanna was she has a really unique viewpoint. She says that leading through disruption is really an opportunity to create a unifying moment. I'm gonna say that again, because when you think about all that there is to do, most people are just putting out fires and trying to figure out how to get their day job done. What she's saying is there's actually a higher role that you can play to create and listen to multiple voices to get to better answers. And I think that's what's going to make our conversation so interesting because it's so multifaceted. But, I want you to get to know Alanna on a personal level because, frankly, that is, sort of how her magic began. And one of the things I learned about her is that we took very different paths when we were each at Northwestern. I was an English person, yes, a little touchy-feely, and Alanna was science and math all the way. And she is a self-proclaimed inner nerd. So I love the way she owns it, and I think it's part of her story. So, Alanna, I was just hoping maybe we could start there and have you tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in Mississippi and how that experience affected your path forward.
Absolutely, absolutely, Laura. Well, thank you for that introduction. I think I'm going to have to pay to take you with me wherever I go.
I'm for hire.
But happy Friday, everyone. First and foremost, Laura, I am a Southern girl. So, born and raised in Mississippi, and everything that comes with that in terms of the importance of people, family, community, good food, and really connection at the heart, that are really authentic and real. Um, I grew up the daughter of an educator, elementary school teacher, so this idea of learning, I read every single thing I could get my hands on, from the moment I could read, and that carried through. And as a matter of fact, the idea of disruption and really challenging myself was really sort of, born in me at a young age, even so much so that I left home at the ripe old age of 16,
Wow.
to go to a boarding school called Mississippi School for Math and Science that was newly created. First class joining, first class graduating. But
Wow.
it was a leap of faith that really helped me push myself and really explore math and science, at a level that I didn't anticipate, especially at that age. But it was a great experience for me and a great set off for the rest of my journey through life, really.
Well, and I know that there was somebody special that was part of your class. The Lucky Strike Extra. Didn't you have a personal relationship that came from that?
I did. I met my husband there, so bonus points for that. We've been together ever since, and life partners on this crazy journey together. So it worked out really well. Sometimes those leaps of faith end up dealing you a full deck of cards, which I'm lucky to say that it did in this case.
So from Mississippi to Evanston, Illinois, and Northwestern, I'd like to think that Northwestern or Kellogg has influenced us all. Tell us a little bit about how your time at Northwestern and really continuing your relationship with Northwestern has influenced your leadership philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, Laura, I'm very fortunate. My time at Northwestern was very formative. Honestly, the idea of me understanding the broad impact I could have on the world, the broad impact I can have on people, and really pushing myself beyond the boundaries that I had been exposed to before I got there. And it continues to do that today. So, this idea of having an impact that's beyond you in a positive way, leading with diversity in mind, because we're such a diverse university with excellence across the campus in all disciplines, and resilience. As an engineering major, continue to explore this idea of science and math. But the rigor of that definitely came with, some toughening that I needed at that age that I'm, frankly thankful for and prepared me well for the big wide world.
Yeah, I love, really, that's been a sort of a central theme from all of our speakers. It's so nice to hear you reinforce that, sort of the role of really thinking about the world as bigger than we are and not just thinking about giving back in business or even in community, but to people. And, I think I sort of want to jump into it with you because
Sure.
when we talk about leading through disruption, one of the things that was different about our conversation than some of the things I've heard is you were really clear about the fact that you think that requires a multi-level, multifaceted plan. And I wonder if you could just sort of talk generally about what that really means to you so that people can sort of understand the different levels that leading through disruption requires from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that definitely came home in 2020 for us is that there are different types of disruption that we experience in our lives and in our personal lives and in our work lives. From a work standpoint, competitive disruption is very real and intensifying in a lot of areas. Societal disruption has always been there, but felt very personally this last year with the pandemic and what's going on with social justice pushes, and then self disruption, because we always have the opportunity to look at ourselves and say, am I really prepared for where I want to go? Am I making the right moves to achieve what I want to achieve and to have the impact that I want to have? And so these areas all come together and impact our teams simultaneously. And so what that means is that we have to have a plan as leaders to help and to really sort of lead our organizations, our teams, and in a lot of cases, our families, our communities through those changes in a way that's holistic, that's complete, and that's impactful and meaningful. So it's important to be aware of all of those as we really sort of move forward.
Can you give us a little bit of an example of, you've worked at Procter and Gamble, you've worked at PepsiCo, you've worked at Samsung. Can you sort of dimensionalize those three levels a little bit through your experiences in those organizations and really give us some concrete examples of that, please?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I was very fortunate to start my career at Procter and Gamble in the baby care unit, what ultimately became the baby care unit because it was a while ago. I don't want to date myself, but the at that time we were facing really intense competition in the diapers business, and I was working in downstream commercialization, innovation, and operations, and really kind of in a high speed manufacturing location. Well, it just so happened at that time we experienced a very significant disruption where one of our major customers canceled our orders and went to the competitors. So, what did that mean, Laura? So, for those of us who worked in high speed manufacturing, you walk in and it's all sorts of PPE, ear protection, face protection, eye protection, hair, and there's still noise, right? There's noise, there's movement, there's activity. Well, imagine going into that same environment, employing 1,000 people, and there's silence. And so, walking into that facility where there are people whose livelihoods count on the ability to produce product on a regular basis. And ultimately, there are consumers who put their trust in us that we were not meeting up to those standards at that period of time, at least the standards we set for ourselves. So, competitive disruption, personal disruption, and then, frankly, what was underneath that was that the needs of parents were changing, and they were changing more rapidly than what we could keep up with at that time. But again, fortunate enough to work at Procter and Gamble, so that's not something that we would lay standing, right? So it's the ability to really understand that society was changing, the norms and the family structure was changing, and therefore we need to serve the family differently with our product. And so accelerated innovation, brought in new technology to be able to meet that need in a quicker clip, and then ultimately being able to positively impact jobs in that community that really relied on that business being healthy and sustainable. But we had to manage through that in a way that brought us all together, right? Think about if we had chosen to start pointing fingers or start, segmenting the challenge in different ways, bringing that together in service to parents with our product in a way that's meaningful really drove the next steps from there.
Yeah, I love that example because really, I think instead of being in crisis management, you which is sort of what we've heard over the last couple of days, is seeing it as an opportunity for change. And
Yes,
I think that really, when you operate on all those different levels, creates just a much more lasting impact.
absolutely, absolutely. And the lesson, right? The lesson that came from that is really sort of making sure that we're connected with what's happening in the world on a regular basis, right? And the assumptions that we had yesterday will not always serve us tomorrow.
Alanna, I can't see you, so I don't know if everybody else can, but we can all still hear you. So I'm just letting you know that.
Okay.
So we'll just keep going without a beat, and I'll just have to look at myself for a little while longer, which is painful, but I know you're out there.
Right.
I want to go back to the conversation around self disruption. Help, sort of help me understand a little bit about what that means, and what it takes to really deliver self disruption. And I guess within that, if you think about most people just thinking about putting out fires, how do you actually make time for what you describe as self disruption? So describe it, explain how you make time for it, and tell us why. I mean, why work on yourself in this time period?
Yeah, I think, when I say self disruption, it's this idea where, I have a ritual where, on an ongoing basis, I really look and try to evaluate, am I set up for and have the skills and capability needed for what's happening in the world now? what's happening in my business now, what's happening new in my business, what's happening new in the world around me, and what's happening next. So, where's the world going? And so, it's a constant evaluation of really, am I prepared? Am I leading well? Am I doing my team service? Am I doing my business service? And so being in touch with the outside world, having a set of advisors, connection points, networking ability, such that you have an understanding of where the world is moving to and constantly evaluating yourself against that. My husband and I have this rule where every 5 years we sort of do a major pull up and we say, okay, where are we in our life? Where are we in our goals? And if it's time for a change, then we look at it and we honestly say, well, here's something I want to experience, or here's something that I think I'm missing. Here's an area I want to invest in for myself and my capability. And we'll go for it. Frankly, we'll build a plan in good Northwestern fashion. Uh, and
A
then
spreadsheet must be involved, I'm sure.
there are spreadsheets involved with our planning, so still the same techie from back in the day at Northwestern, but having that plan and really being able to be humble enough to say what are the skills that I have and what do I need for where I'm trying to go.
So, I get this image of multiple plates go spinning at the same time, and having to be really coordinated to keep that going, and then also be thoughtful about where you're going. When you talked about disruption as a unifying moment, one of the things that struck me was you told me you got to bring people together to create a collective experience. And to do that, you have to create coalitions. And you referenced a great example for how you did that at Samsung. I hope that you could just help us understand, as a busy person, how do you make time for that? And what does it really look like to bring people together in a way that has a lasting impact?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great question. It's one that I struggled with certainly earlier in my career and even to this day, frankly, because time is always precious. But what I've tried to shift to is this idea of getting work done through coalitions, not in addition to coalitions.
Ah,
So this idea of bringing people together in service of a higher order mission, honestly, where you really can be unified and come together and have mutual benefit, mutual interest, and mutual impact that is bigger than the impact you can make alone. So that as the motivating factor is really really important. One of the areas that I'm really most proud of from my time at Samsung, leading businesses across the world, but honestly, uh, everything is really a people role. So while there, we actually started working very significantly, seriously on our diversity agenda, really looking to take it to the next level. And one of the things as a best practice we realized is that we did not have employee resource groups. They actually did not exist anywhere in Samsung globally. And myself and a few co-conspirators decided, well, it's time, right? And so we created the first employee resource group, Women in Samsung Electronics. Powerful group, really looking to be a network, a hub, a community for women across the U.S. and then ultimately across the globe. Um, really an opportunity for us to do work in areas that matter to us, whether that be product or employee initiatives. And one of the things, Laura, I'm most proud of is when I left Samsung, there were 5 employee resource groups starting from
wow.
that one. And so a small, mighty coalition can be powerful and have significant positive impact inside and outside an organization.
So I think about that, and I think about what that really means inside the culture of a Korean, of a company that maybe doesn't have the same culture that you're trying to create. Talk to us a little bit about at that moment. Was it about asking for permission, or was it really just bringing people together and creating some momentum? Because I hear a lot of times people say my company is really not open to that. So how do you break through that and disrupt that in a way that actually makes progress?
Yeah, I think as leaders, I think we have to become better listeners, and we have to realize that everyone's experience is different, right? Just because an experience in a part of the world is different, it's okay, right? It's okay to say, well, that's not my experience, but tell me more. Help me learn. And the most important words from a leader, I think, is how can I help? So, as leaders, opening the door and opening up the table to support in ways that may be a little bit foreign to you, but you hired good people, trusting them to navigate and build uh, institutions, communities that will help drive performance and connectivity across the organization. And so then it's a matter of, doing the work, Laura. So you have to
What?
you have to really sort of roll your sleeves up and say, okay, if we're going to do this, how are we going to do it? Invite people in who have a shared passion and a shared mission. And once you do that, it ends up taking a life of its own because the connectivity that it brings is really rejuvenating to an organization.
I love that idea, which is don't let don't let the idea of what you can't do stand in your way of bringing people together and seeing what that actually accomplishes. That in itself is a bit disruptive. I think there's a good segue to one of the questions that I see coming from the audience listening, which is sounds great. Sounds like you have a really great skill set at this, Alanna. How do you actually coach and mentor people that either work for you or people across the organization to enable that kind of disruption? And frankly, underneath that, how do you help people have the right self awareness to understand where they are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, creating a culture of openness and transparency is really important. I do that, I try to do that honestly at the start with the invitation, right? There's a broad invitation to participate in whatever work streams I have going on because I'm a firm believer that, whatever I do alone will be made better by others and can be made better by others. And so it starts with that invitation and the example you set by who you're inviting to the tables in which you're leading. Um, I believe, Laura, that there is a marriage and not a disconnect between high expectations and high trust in an organization. You can have high expectations of individuals to perform and to better themselves, right? I often say we must get better here, right? And it's we, it's not you, it's we must get better here, right? And so it's a bit of a push at the back of the organization to really learn and lean into those spaces where we're not quite the best at, but we need to get better at. And then again, that example usually will help people sort of step up and attract those folks to you who are interested in that vision.
Alanna, do you typically share your personal leadership philosophy with your teams as part of that process? And I guess related to that, um, how are you sort of assessing the level of disruption that's required? I think about you in this new role at Coca-Cola, and I think, well, what does your Alanna radar do? How do you quickly assess the situation and start to have impact day one?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's a broad assessment. right? It's a broad assessment. It's a very interesting time. I think it will continue to be an interesting time in Europe as we lead globally. A lot of shared human experiences in terms of we're all going through the pandemic. We're all experiencing a few socioeconomic interesting issues. This idea between affordability and premiumization that's coming through still across the industries that I work in. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, people are people and they want to feel valued and respected, trusted, and some safety that we can provide in corporate America. And so, this idea that finding the humanity in all those things, keeping that at the center, and then doing a broad assessment. And I usually do outside to in and then inside to out. So how are we, where do we stand? How are we competing? What's the tone? What's the tenure? What do our stakeholders feel about us? Where are we excellent? Where do we need some improvement? And I try to do that very transparently. I show and share my observations in a very humble way. And I share my philosophies and my management style really clearly, transparently up front. And then, Laura, always the invitation is very broad to the table in which I operate. So making sure that there's a constant pulse of feedback coming in that makes sure that we stay on our toes for sure.
Well, you just confirmed for me sort of what the center point is of your, unifying through disruption, which is you believe in humanity and having people be included and bringing that to the center. And, that's not a business philosophy, really. That's a human philosophy. And it seems as though that's really translated in, almost everything that you do, which I really appreciate. Talk a little bit about, though, the difference between leading disruption and managing disruption.
Yeah. That's an interesting one, for sure. Back in the day when I was just joined corporate America, there's a lot of books written about being a manager versus a leader. And I think where we are today, Laura, because of frankly, the magnitude of the shifts we're experiencing, we have to do both. We have to manage day to day because, the teams and our communities are facing real challenges today, whether it be child care, for aging, whether social job search, new jobs, upskilling, multi-generational hiring and workforces. I mean, just the confluence of what's happening in our society today, the magnitude is huge. So we must be present and manage the day to day and make sure we're in touch with how our teams are experiencing that. At the same time, we have to carve out, and I use those words very intentionally, carve out time to make sure we're doing some projections into the future, living out the vision that we set for ourselves. And then we have to staff those things, right? We have to do the test and learns. We have to make sure we understand what capability gaps we have and capabilities we want to build to get to our long-term vision. And so, one of my favorite saying is we're living in a time of and, not or. So doing both of those things still in a prioritized way is going to be increasingly important, I think, as we move forward in this time of disruption and change.
So talk a little bit about how what you just described led you then to take the opportunity at Coke, because clearly you were doing well at whatever you were doing. I mean, are you just saying there's just not enough disruption in my current opportunity? I think I'll go to a place where I could get more, or is it just how you represent that as part of what you're looking for moving forward, because it's what you do best.
Yeah, I think, anytime there's a new opportunity, there's a little bit about what you choose and what the opportunities are that come to you. I can tell you, I'm excited about the journey ahead because the more I learn, I've launched products all over the world. I've led businesses all over the world, lot based in U.S. But this sort of idea that we're experiencing some of the same forces, and so leading, the current business that I have, as you say, 26 countries, 100 plus brands. Um, all experiencing this idea of disruption at the same time, we will learn, we will grow, and we will perform at the same time that we're transforming. And so the opportunity to do that is really, really exciting. And I think that's one of the things that is the secret sauce for the next 2 years. There's a lot of, gosh, I'm glad 2020 is over and ready to get back to normal. And I'm one of those, I have to say. But I think the idea ultimately that we're living in an age of disruption, where we're living in an age of the need for constant agility, for a level of comfort with ambiguity. There's this idea of managing across a pandemic, managing across the something that's as big as Brexit, managing a complex portfolio in an ever competitive environment that will teach you, and frankly, the potential to make an impact is quite large. So I'm excited about that.
Well, I mean, they tapped a great person, but I think what you're saying is you're really loving the opportunity to see what the diverse countries will teach you that you can bring back to your broader organization. So it's yet another continuous learning opportunity for you, which you said was one of your philosophies. It makes perfect sense now.
Absolutely.
Um, talk, tell the group just a little bit about um, how the concept of that creating unifying voices, one of the challenges I think everybody's experiencing right now is depending on the age or the time period in which you're entering the workforce, multi-generational workforces are different. People want different things out of their work life. Talk a little bit about how you coach and mentor younger people in particular, and bring that so that it's relevant to the broader group, not to separate them out, but how do you actually bring people along that haven't had the tenure and the experience that you have had, and how do you tap them for their own leadership?
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to a personal philosophy. I think no matter what age, creed, gender, etc., um, everyone has something to learn, and everyone has something to teach, and everyone has gifts, right? Our responsibility as leaders is to bring those gifts forward in service of something um, bigger than ourselves. So what I found that, again, not the stereotype, but what I found across, if there's a higher order purpose that we're working towards, it resonates with people of all ages, particularly those who are just coming into the workforce, who have experienced disruption in their life and are looking for meaning, right? And so I'll give you an example of that, Laura. I think, at Samsung, I had the opportunity to lead a number of fast growing businesses, and one of those was the smartwatch business right at the inception of the category itself, which was really, really exciting. And we started the journey with the idea of a smartwatch and this device as being another form of communication, which it can be, right? For quick calls and the ability to quickly access things that are relevant and important to you. But we found a higher order calling when we said this device is uniquely positioned to help uh, our consumers on their health journey. right? No matter where they are in their journey, whether it be prevention, rehabilitation, diagnostics, we feel like we could play a role in that, in bringing consumers more information and helping them reach whatever goal they set for themselves, including wellness. And so that higher order mission again became unifying, and people started raising their hands, and then passions came through, where folks were really became creative about not just sort of how we had originally defined the value proposition, but also about what it could be, and providing a little bit of wind at our back to be able to really sort of ultimately meet that mission. So again, it became a point of unification. It became a really sort of a North Star for us, because it was, bigger than us and had the potential to leave a significant legacy as we were leading.
Right. I mean, I think that's a fantastic example. So I think we've got a couple of questions that are coming
Sure.
in now from the audience. And one of them is about, just overall, there's a higher level of anxiety. It's pandemic and social justice focused today and economically focused today. But, is that higher anxiety something that you think requires sort of special care? And how do you see managing through that uh, over the next few years and frankly into the future?
Yeah, I do, honestly, Laura. I think it's very prevalent. It also is steeped in the human experience. No matter where you go in the world, you find people who feel disadvantaged and unheard and unseen. And there are systemic issues resolving, that really are a part of that as well. So it's important. What I will tell you is that as we, as organizations, look to think about how we can help, how we can be mindful of driving performance in this world, that's going to be even more important that we think about diversity and inclusion, is that representation matters. This is the different voices at the table, right? So making sure that our teams, our leadership teams, are broad and diverse enough so that we can have an understanding of what we're doing, and how it's impacting our communities, right? And so if you don't have that voice at the table, we're operating in a way blind. We're operating with you know, an incomplete view of the world. And so I think the first and foremost is representation, looking at our teams, figuring out if we have all the voices we need to move forward and build the culture that we need, and then help. I think that a lot of what you saw from 2020 was emotional, and very real for Black people in America, but frankly, for a lot of people around the world. And what I love is that I saw corporations standing up, not just community organizations or churches or political environments, but corporations standing up and say, let me make sure my environment is set up such that I'm aware, I can be helpful, and I can help drive. But I think it's going to be increasingly more important as we go forward. The world is
Yeah.
becoming more diverse, right?
Yes, and I think that builds on one of the questions that I see in the chat too, which is there's just this huge desire to go back to something that is normal, but there is no normal to go back to, and so people are trying to figure out how to reconstruct their lives. I guess one question for you is how do you build sort of that humanness into your day-to-day management style, especially as we're all virtual? How do you personally check in on people and encourage that kind of conversation without having it be disruptive or distracting to the work that you're doing? And I know you're an and, so it's not an either or situation, but I also know from talking to you, it takes some discipline to regularly do that. So how do you personally do that? And what would you recommend to people to do that would really show people that they are being thought of, that it is we.
Yeah, for sure. I think first of all, it requires a level of authenticity and sincerity that you have to sort of check in with yourself on before you engage in those conversations. You have to be sort of self-managed to make sure you're ready to engage. And then it takes awareness and then encouragement of others, honestly, to do the check-ins because as well as yourself, right? So especially now, we're bringing our whole selves into the workforce. And so we know someone who's struggling with a family member who's had some issues from the pandemic. Check in on your colleagues. Has anyone talked to them? Has anyone called them? Right? And so making sure that it's not just the leader, but it's a collective effort, that we're really caring for the person who we work side by side with on a daily basis. And so creating an environment, check with myself that I'm really ready to hear and I'm emotionally ready to listen and learn because everyone's story is different. They're experiencing it personally based on their current situation and their background. But I know after the George Floyd incident, a number of people, it was an emotional time, and a lot of people had to compartmentalize that and get right back to work. So taking a moment and saying, "Hey, how are you feeling? Everybody okay? Everyone saw this? Okay, right. Let's talk about it."
I knew I liked you from our previous conversations. I mean, that just shows how much it's not just heart. It's really, really working to put yourself in people's shoes, which just ties back to that sort of unifying moment that you talk so much about. But you sort of make it sound easy. So I'm going to poke you a little bit here.
Yeah,
I'm going to say,
go for it, Laura.
I think a lot of people would say, gosh, Alanna, that sounds lovely. But I basically have naysayers who, in some way, think that what we're talking about is very soft. And I just have to deliver the bottom line results. And what I really need is some tips to actually, overcome some of those hurdles. So we know you've had to do that. So tell us about a few of those moments and give people on the call sort of that courage to really take on the naysayer and do this with people and bring people along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's never when you're experiencing disruption because emotions are involved in disruption, Laura. Like it's never it's never easy. So that you may not even recognize the person on the other end of the virtual call because their emotions are there.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I think it starts with self and managing self and making sure that you're okay and you've done the wellness stuff you need to do. You've read the books, you've done the meditation or whatever, gone cycling or walking. You room. Managers is really important. And then secondly, when you get there to those tough conversations, it's going to sound a little Pollyanna, but try to give grace and stay in the conversation, right? Try to meet them where they are. Ask questions. I was thinking the other day that there are a few people that I've worked with in the past, and I don't know if I've ever heard them ask a question other than, "Are there any questions?" So we have to figure out how to ask better questions and to be really curious about what people are experiencing. And those one-on-one conversations can happen virtually. They're awkward at first. Get past the awkwardness, push forward, be sincere, and you'll learn something. You'll learn something about yourself. You'll grow, right, as you go forth as well.
So I think that's a fantastic push. So thanks for letting me poke you a little bit.
Sure,
And
please. I love it.
I'm just gonna ask you to sort of be practical and distill down all the things that you've learned to what are the 3 or 4 skills that someone who is going to lead through disruption needs to go back and just say, where am I? on these skills, and how do you advocate building that skill set? Is it purely experience and just get better at it because you're conscious of it, or are there ways to actually build those skills?
Yeah, you have to build it. You have to be focused on it, right? So I think one of the skills that's getting most tested in us is actually a softer skill, right? It's a skill of communication. And so you have to invest in it, right? Especially if you're getting ready to have a tough conversation. What words could I use? What do I think is going to happen? What do I think the response is going to say? If that's the response, what's my response? So you have to invest in good communication skills, especially in this virtual environment we're in right now, because misunderstandings can be amplified because you don't have the person to person dialogue. So investing in getting better at communication and this idea of um, uh, being heard and making sure your point of view lands well, right? So
Can you
you have a
explain what that
response.
means? Can you
What that
explain what that
means
means?
is what
Yeah.
that means is you may have said what you meant to say, but the person didn't understand it, so you're not done. You're not done, right? So you have to figure out how to communicate in a way where your message is going to be received by the person on the receiving end. And that means
Ooh.
style, flexibility, it means communication flexibility, it means approach flexibility, and it means, again, having good self awareness and good self control to manage the emotions of the moment that we're living in right now.
So, do you recommend having someone in the organization to give you
Yeah,
feedback on that?
I do. I do. I mean, especially in those tough conversations, I'll go in and I'll say, okay, especially in a situation like now where I'm getting to know a new team, different backgrounds, different countries, different experiences. And I say, okay, we're getting ready to have this tough conversation, right? Uh, what do you think the response is going to be? Here's my point of view. What do you think? There's nothing wrong with checking in. Even as a leader, you need to check in because you don't know everything, right? And so that humility is really, really important. And so I have a broad swath of people in in my virtual Rolodex that I can call and say, hey, I'm experiencing this. I don't necessarily understand why I'm getting this degree of emotion or this sort of, lack of response or extra response. Can you give me some insight to what's behind it? And then once you understand what's behind it, then you can go into style
Mm.
flexibility and the ability to meet people where they are when you can.
So
Hopefully
once
that
again,
helps.
you're sort of tying your idea of this, you're not in this alone, but it really takes some humility to go ask people for that, because your starting point is it's not working the way that I want it to work, and really being honest and open about that. I think that is a great lesson for everybody listening, because I think we think we're judged on when we get it right.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And you and I have talked about this idea of, we're living in a time where we're going from leaders as know-it-alls to learn-it-alls, right?
Yeah.
I think I forget who coined that language, but it definitely resounds with me, where you don't have to be the one standing at the podium all the time. You set the direction, high expectations, set the environment, and then ask questions, be humble, and operate with courage and conviction in the things that matter.
So we're getting into the shoot. So I'm going to just say, be thinking, Elena, about some of your wrap up remarks. But first, there's a couple of
Yeah,
questions that I think,
sure.
that I think make sense, and I want to lead off with one for you, and then a follow, and because it has a nice follow on with something that I see in the chat.
Great.
Is there someone that has been particularly influential to you in your career in teaching you about leading disruption, and why? Was it a positive experience or sort of a negative experience? I think we all have both of those. And then, I see here
fair share. Go ahead.
Yes, I think most of us have had our fair share of both, and I would say we both, back to being a lifetime learner, both are good. One's a little more painful, both are good. So who has that been for you? And then I think, what you hear in what I see in the chat is people just craving, when people get to that point of almost despair because they don't feel seen or they don't feel heard, it's not about coaching them up. It's really about picking them up. What do you really recommend to the people that are, listening to you today to do that? Because I think everybody is at a point now where people want to lift each other up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely had the experience of leading through disruption. It was actually a former boss of mine who was a former partner at McKinsey and just a great human being, honestly. What he helped me do, and is still helping me do today, so that's one lesson, is to really think through and identify really sort of the elements of a problem, diagnose them, and then tackle them in really sort of mini sprints, right? And dimensionalize it.
Well, can you say that again? That is really interesting. Say that one more time.
Let's see if I can.
I know.
But it helped me really sort of take a problem, right, and break it down into its parts. And then really think about what is a strategic plan to go after it in mini sprints.
Mini sprints. Love it.
Again, not sure who coined that, but he's the one who taught me and is still teaching me to this day. Because ultimately, because we're dealing with a very complex world, every problem that we face is real and meaty has multiple parts and multiple sections and people involved, which makes it even more complex. And so how do we think about tackling that in a strategic, processed way that allows us to really go after it thoughtfully and bring people along with us as we do that? And then your second question is a very different question, right? It's a question of people feeling a lot of just, frankly, leftover emotion. I think in terms of what's happening in 2020, people are still in the middle of pandemic. And I would say you would be surprised by the impact that you would have of just having a one-on-one conversation with someone on your team and say, I see you. I see you. And a lot of people, in Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she talks about this idea of invisibility. And what does that really mean? I can tell you what that means as a Black woman a lot of times. It means I see part of you, I don't see all of you. Right. So if you say to someone, I see your pain, I see your gifts, I see your promise, I see your potential, I see you. That is powerful. Don't underestimate it. Don't underestimate it. Lean into it. It has to be sincere because people can spot it when it's not. But lean into it, and you never know where it may lead, right? And people will come to you when they're ready, if they feel seen and heard and valued.
Okay, so this one is going to stick with me for a long time. I feel so lucky to have heard you express that the way that you did. You do have such an authenticness about you. I really feel like you are somebody who teaches through the way you operate yourself. And I think we all have so much to learn through your experience. I would like to give you just a few minutes to sort of sum up. If we had a long conversation and it was sort of nuanced, and I think, accomplished a greater voice together. And I really can't wait to actually meet you in person. But I hope you'll leave the folks that are still with us listening with a couple of action steps. So how do you make leading disruption become a unifying voice? And what are the 2 or 3 things that you just think are very critical for everybody here to take away and consider how they can make an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully this is helpful. And I too have enjoyed our time together. I think I always enjoy being challenged and really the opportunity to share. For me, it's looking at disruption um, ultimately as an opportunity. It's an
Disruption
opportunity.
as an opportunity.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for personal growth, first of all. But it's also an opportunity to grow our organizations and to grow our business. And one of the things that has stuck with me is that I lean into those change makers. So there are people who are always on the front end of what's happening in society, right? Who are connected, who are really sort of leading the change. Having discussions with them about why, what are they looking to accomplish, how do they want to live their lives. Um, in my time running tablets and PCs, we were inspired by the gig economy. So I talked to a number of people who um, had just enjoyed the freedom to be able to create their workspace and to live out their passions and to do meaningful work in the way that worked for their lives. And so it became our mission to serve those people and to serve them well and to provide them with the tools that they needed because it was such an important mission and vision they had for themselves. And so talking to the change makers and understanding what's happening with them is a key one that has always been one for me. And don't shy away from that. And the idea of uh, taking bold steps, leading uh, with leaps of faith, letting go of fear, and leading with courage is another one that sticks with me as well.
Well, I think you've inspired us all through your stories. I feel certain, like me, most people here might not want the conversation to end here, Alanna. So the question I have for you is there a way for people to connect with you beyond the Kellogg Symposium? And I guess my last question of you would be, what are you going to tell your daughter about this conversation? And you really only have about a minute left, so it's going to be like that.
Yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll find me there. Just send me a note, send me a message. I'd love to connect with you and continue the conversations, particularly those who are looking for global impacts, and we can have some shared experiences there. My daughter is a fellow Northwestern grad, fellow Wildcat biomedical engineering. I can tell you that proud to represent the purple.
Yeah, you were great today, Alanna. Thank you so much for your time on behalf of everybody at the symposium and all the purple people on this call and beyond. We want to say thank you for your time, your passion, your energy, and we can do this. So thank you so much for everything you brought to our symposium today.
Great. Thank you, Laura. It's my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
So great to talk to you.
Friday.